The child shouldn't have been alive. That's what Ethan Cole thought when he first saw her. A small shape crumpled against a roadside boulder in the Nevada wasteland, fever-bright eyes fixed on the empty horizon like she was waiting for salvation that would never come. She couldn't have been more than 7, her dress sun-bleached to the color of bone, her lips cracked and bleeding. "My papa's coming back," she whispered when Ethan dismounted. He promised. But Ethan had seen enough broken promises scattered across the frontier to know what abandonment looked like. This child was dying, and her father was gone. Before we begin Lily Harper's story of survival, hope, and the strangers who became family, I invite you to join us on this journey. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far Lily's story travels. Now let's begin where all second chances start. In the dust of the desert, where the sun shows no mercy, and neither does the truth. The desert had a way of revealing what people truly were. It stripped away pretense, burned off lies, left only the raw truth of a person's character exposed beneath the merciless sun. Ethan Cole had learned that lesson years ago, and he'd built his life around it. Keep moving, trust no one, expect nothing. The philosophy had served him well through a decade of drifting from mining camps to cattle towns, from the Montana Territory down through Wyoming, and now into the Nevada wasteland where even hope seemed to shrivel and die. He'd been riding since dawn, his horse's hooves kicking up dust that hung in the still air like smoke. The August heat was the kind that made men see things that weren't there, shimmering lakes on the horizon, shade where there was none. Ethan had learned to ignore such tricks, to focus only on what was real. The weight of his canteen, the Winchester rifle across his saddle, the $23 in his pocket that would get him to California if he was careful. That's why he almost rode past her. The boulder sat 50 yards off the rutted trail, just another sun-baked rock formation in a landscape full of them. But something made him look twice. Maybe the unnatural stillness of the small shape huddled against it. Maybe some instinct he'd thought he'd lost years ago. He reined in his horse, a bay gelding named Judge, and sat there squinting against the glare. The shape moved. Just slightly, but enough. Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd seen abandoned things before out here. Broken wagons, dead cattle, graves marked with crude crosses. Sometimes people. The desert attracted desperate souls fleeing something or chasing dreams, and it consumed them with equal indifference. Whatever this was, it wasn't his problem. He had his own destination, his own reasons for heading west. Getting involved with desert casualties was a fool's errand. He clicked his tongue, ready to move on. The shape moved again, and this time he caught a flash of faded calico. "Damn it," Ethan muttered, dismounting. His boots hit the hard pan with a crunch that seemed obscenely loud in the stillness. Judge snorted, unhappy about the stop, but Ethan was already walking toward the boulder, his hand instinctively checking the Colt at his hip. Out here, you approached everything with caution. As he got closer, the details emerged with horrible clarity. A child. A little girl, thin as a scarecrow, her dress so sun-faded it was nearly white. Her hair hung in tangled brown strands around a face that was all sharp angles and fever-bright eyes. She was sitting with her back against the rock, her legs drawn up, her bare feet crusted with dried blood and dirt. A small cloth bundle sat beside her and she clutched it like it contained all her worldly possessions. It probably did. Those eyes tracked him as he approached, neither fearful nor hopeful, just watching with an ancient weariness that no child should possess. "Water," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper, raw and cracked. "Please." Ethan crouched a few feet away, staying cautious even though this slip of a girl could hardly pose a threat. He unslung his canteen, opened it, and held it out. She grabbed it with trembling hands and drank in desperate gulps, water spilling down her chin. He let her have 3 good swallows before gently pulling it back. "Easy, too much at once will make you sick." She nodded, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Up close, she looked even worse. Her skin was burned and peeling, her lips split, her eyes sunken. She couldn't have been out here long, maybe a day or 2 at most, but in this heat, that was more than enough to kill. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. "Lily." She was staring at his canteen like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Lily Harper." "Where are your folks, Lily Harper?" The question made her eyes go even brighter, and for a horrible moment Ethan thought she might cry. But she didn't. Instead, she turned that ancient gaze toward the eastern horizon, back the way Ethan had come. Papa went to get help, she said. He said to wait right here, that he'd come back. She looked back at Ethan with absolute certainty. He promised. The words hit Ethan like a fist to the gut. He knew that kind of promise. He'd made similar ones himself once, long ago, before he'd learned that promises were just words that meant nothing, when survival was on the line. This child had been left here to die, probably by a father who decided saving himself was more important than whatever burden a sick kid represented. How long ago did he leave? Lily's brow furrowed. Morning. It was morning. The sun was there. She pointed to the east. Papa said he'd be back before it got hot. Ethan looked at the sun, now past its zenith and beginning its slow descent. If she was telling the truth, she'd been sitting here for at least a day, maybe longer. Time could get confused when you were fevered and alone. Her father wasn't coming back. "You got any water?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. She shook her head. Papa took the canteen. He said he needed it to get help faster. Of course he did. Ethan felt a familiar anger rising. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, bitter fury he felt whenever he encountered the casual cruelty people inflicted on each other out here. A father taking the water and leaving his child to bake in the sun wasn't even the worst thing Ethan had seen in his years of drifting, but it was close enough. He studied Lily more carefully, the fever in her eyes, the way she held herself so still. She was sick. Had been for a while, probably. Maybe that's why her father had left her. Sick children were expensive, required doctors and medicine and time, none of which most frontier families could afford. Easier to tell yourself you were going for help than to admit you were abandoning your own blood because keeping her alive was too hard. "Can you stand?" Ethan asked. Lily tried, pushing herself up against the boulder. She got about halfway before her legs buckled. Ethan caught her before she hit the ground, and the heat coming off her small body shocked him. This wasn't just sun fever. She was burning up with something internal, something that had been eating at her strength for days. "I can walk," Lily insisted, even as she sagged against him. "I just need to rest a minute." "Sure you can." Ethan scooped her up, surprised at how little she weighed. She was all bones and determination, this one. "But we're going to ride instead. Save your strength." "But Papa..." "Your Papa will find us," Ethan lied smoothly. "We're going to the nearest town, get you to a doctor. When your Papa comes back here and sees you're gone, he'll track us there. That's what fathers do." He could feel Lily relax slightly against his chest, wanting to believe. Children were like that. They'd cling to any scrap of hope you offered them, even when the truth was staring them in the face. Ethan carried her to Judge, who eyed the small passenger with suspicion. The horse had never liked surprises. "Easy," Ethan murmured, mounting awkwardly with Lily in his arms. She weighed so little it barely affected his balance. He settled her in front of him, one arm wrapped around her to keep her secure, and turned Judge back toward the trail. "What about my bundle?" Lily asked, twisting to look back. "I've got it." Ethan had snagged it with one hand before mounting. Whatever was in the cloth sack couldn't have weighed more than a few pounds. He handed it to her, and she clutched it like a lifeline. As they rode, Ethan did the calculations. The nearest settlement was Cedar Springs, maybe 15 miles northwest. With Judge carrying double, pushing through the heat, they could make it by nightfall if they were lucky. If Lily lasted that long. She was already drifting in and out of consciousness, her head lolling against his chest, her breathing shallow and quick. He gave her water every few miles, just enough to keep her throat wet. She drank obediently, asking once when her Papa would arrive, then falling silent when Ethan repeated his lie about tracking them to town. The third time he offered water, she barely swallowed, and Ethan felt his jaw tighten. The sun crawled across the sky with agonizing slowness. The desert stretched out in all directions, broken only by scattered sage and the occasional twisted juniper clinging to life in some hidden water pocket. Nothing moved except the heat shimmer and the occasional vulture circling overhead. The birds knew. They were just waiting to see if this little drama would end in a meal for them. Not today, Ethan thought grimly. Not this one. He talked to Lily as they rode, even when she seemed too far gone to hear. He told her about California, about the green valleys and cool water he'd heard existed beyond the mountains. He described forests so thick the sun couldn't reach the ground, rivers so clear you could see every pebble on the bottom. He made it all up, pulling from stories he'd heard in saloons and mining camps, painting pictures of a promised land he'd never seen. But it seemed to help. Lily would stir when he talked. Her breathing would steady, and once he even felt her small hand grip his shirt. "Is it really like that?" she whispered during one of her conscious moments. "Sure is," Ethan said. "And the best part? In California, the sun isn't angry like it is here. It's gentle, warm enough to grow things, but not so hot it burns you up." "I'd like to see that," Lily murmured. "Me and Papa." Ethan said nothing. He just kept Judge moving northwest, following the trail toward Cedar Springs and whatever waited there. The town appeared first as a smudge of green on the horizon, the telltale cottonwoods that marked water. As they got closer, buildings materialized, a scattering of rough structures clustered around what looked like a central street. Cedar Springs wasn't much, maybe 30 buildings total, the kind of settlement that existed solely to service the mines in the surrounding hills, but right now it looked like salvation. The sun was touching the western horizon when Judge carried them down the main street. A few people looked up from their business, eyes tracking the stranger carrying the small bundle. Ethan ignored them, his attention focused on finding one specific building. There, a structure slightly larger than the others, with a hand-painted sign that read, "Dr. Samuel Worth, Physician." Ethan dismounted carefully, keeping Lily cradled against his chest. She was barely conscious now, her head lolling, her breathing rapid and shallow. He shouldered through the doctor's door without knocking. The man inside looked up from a desk covered in papers. He was maybe 50, with gray-shot hair and the weathered look of someone who'd spent years in these frontier settlements. His eyes took in Ethan and Lily in one practiced glance, and he was moving before Ethan could speak. "Examination table," Dr. Worth said, gesturing toward a cloth-covered surface. "How long has she been fevered?" "Don't know. Found her maybe 6 hours ago, sitting in the desert. She's been like this the whole ride." Ethan laid Lily down as gently as he could. She made a small sound of protest, her hand reaching for him instinctively before falling back. Dr. Worth was already working, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. He felt her forehead, checked her pulse, looked in her eyes and mouth. Dehydration, obviously, but there's something else. He pressed gently on her stomach, and Lily whimpered. "Infection, likely. Has she complained of pain?" "She hasn't complained about anything," Ethan said. "Tough little thing." "Too tough, probably." Dr. Worth was pulling bottles from a cabinet, mixing something in a glass. "Children out here learn early that complaining doesn't help. Where are her parents? Father left her in the desert, said he was getting help." The doctor's jaw tightened, but he didn't comment. He'd probably seen worse. "Help me sit her up." Together they got Lily upright enough to swallow the medicine the doctor had prepared. She coughed, tried to push it away, but Dr. Worth was firm. "I know it tastes awful, child, but it'll help. Trust me." Whether Lily trusted him or not, she was too weak to fight. She swallowed the medicine and immediately slumped back, her eyes fluttering closed. "Will she live?" Ethan asked. "Doctor." Worth was covering Lily with a blanket, his expression unreadable. "Probably. The infection isn't too advanced yet, and she's stronger than she looks. But another day in that desert and we'd be having a different conversation." He looked at Ethan. "You saved her life, mister." Ethan Cole. He didn't mention that saving lives wasn't something he made a habit of. "What does she need?" "Rest, fluids, medicine 3 times a day. The fever should break in a day or 2 if we're lucky." Dr. Worth moved to wash his hands in a basin. "Then we figure out what to do with her. You family?" "Never saw her before today." "Didn't think so. You've got that look about you, the drifter kind. No offense." "None taken." Ethan glanced at Lily, small and still on the examination table. "The father might come looking for her." "And if he doesn't?" It was the question Ethan had been avoiding. What happened to abandoned children in places like Cedar Springs? There were orphanages in the bigger cities, but out here? At best, she'd end up with whatever family needed free labor. At worst, Ethan didn't want to think about the worst. "Let's deal with that when we come to it," he said. "Right now, she needs to survive." Dr. Worth nodded slowly. "She can stay here. I've got a back room, used to be for live-in patients when the mines were busier. It's not much, but it's clean and quiet. You planning on staying in town?" "For a bit." Ethan hadn't planned on staying anywhere, but he heard himself saying it anyway. "Want to make sure she pulls through." "That's decent of you." Dr. Worth gestured toward a chair. "You can wait here if you want. She'll probably sleep through the night, but sometimes they wake up confused. Familiar face might help." Ethan should have left. He'd done his part. Got the girl to safety, made sure she'd be cared for. His obligation was fulfilled. He could stable Judge at the livery, get a meal and a bed at whatever passed for a hotel in this town, and ride out in the morning with a clear conscience. The smart thing would be to walk away right now. Instead, he pulled the chair closer to the examination table and sat down. "I'll stay," he said. Dr. Worth raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. He just nodded and went back to his desk, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and the small, fevered child who'd somehow become his responsibility. The hours crawled past. Outside, Cedar Springs settled into evening. The sounds of the stamp mills shutting down, the saloons opening up, the general murmur of a mining town transitioning from work to whatever passed for entertainment. Inside the doctor's office, Lily slept fitfully, occasionally whimpering or calling out for her papa. Each time, Ethan found himself leaning closer, murmuring something reassuring even though he doubted she could hear him. Around midnight, she woke up screaming. Ethan was on his feet instantly, hands hovering uselessly as Lily thrashed on the table. Her eyes were open, but unseeing, lost in whatever fevered nightmare had claimed her. Dr. Worth appeared from the back room, moving quickly to hold her still before she could hurt herself. "It's all right," the doctor said firmly. "You're safe, child. You're safe." "Papa," Lily was sobbing now, fighting against Dr. Worth's grip. "Papa left me. He left me and I waited and he didn't come back." The words hit Ethan harder than they should have. He'd suspected the truth, known it really, but hearing it from Lily's own mouth made it real in a way that surmise couldn't match. This child had sat in that desert, burning with fever, fully aware that her father had abandoned her. And still she'd waited. Still she'd clung to the promise he'd made. "Hey," Ethan moved into her line of sight, letting her fevered eyes focus on him. "Hey, Lily, remember me. I found you by the rock, brought you here." Recognition flickered. "You said Papa would find me." I know I did." The lie sat bitter on his tongue. "But right now, you need to rest. Let the medicine work. Can you do that?" Lily's struggles were weakening, the fever reasserting its grip. "Don't leave me," she whispered. "Please don't leave me alone." The plea punched through every defense Ethan had built over the past decade. He reached out, hesitated, then took her small hand in his. It was burning hot, fragile as bird bones. "I'm right here," he said, "not going anywhere." Lily's eyes closed, but her hand stayed clenched around his fingers. Dr. Worth caught Ethan's gaze over the child's head, his expression knowing. "You're in trouble now," the doctor said quietly. "I know," Ethan replied. He spent the night in that chair, Lily's hand wrapped around his, watching her small chest rise and fall with each labored breath. Somewhere outside, a drunk was singing off-key, the saloon piano plinking out a melancholy tune, the sounds of life continuing while this one small life hung in the balance. As dawn began to gray the windows, Lily's fever finally broke. The heat in her skin subsided to something more natural, her breathing evened out, and her grip on Ethan's hand relaxed into normal sleep. Dr. Worth checked her vitals and nodded with satisfaction. "She'll make it," he said. "Young ones are resilient." Ethan felt something unknot in his chest, tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "How long until she's on her feet?" "Few days, maybe a week. She needs to regain her strength, get some proper food in her." Dr. Worth studied Ethan. "You really planning to stay that long?" "Guess I am." "Can I ask why? No offense, but you don't seem like the settling type." Ethan looked at Lily, peaceful now in genuine sleep rather than fever dreams. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But that child asked me not to leave her alone. Seemed important to keep that promise, seeing as everyone else broke theirs." Dr. Worth nodded slowly. "Well then, you'll need a place to stay. Mrs. Henderson runs a boarding house 2 streets over, clean beds, decent food, reasonable rates. Tell her I sent you." "I will." Ethan gently extracted his hand from Lily's, careful not to wake her. His fingers were cramped from being held so long, but he didn't mind. "I'll stable my horse and get settled. Be back this afternoon to check on her." "She'll be fine. I'll keep an eye on her." Ethan headed for the door, then paused. "The father, if he shows up, you'll be the first to know," Dr. Worth promised. "Though between you and me, Mr. Cole, I wouldn't hold my breath. Men who abandon their children in the desert rarely develop a conscience later." The words echoed what Ethan already knew, but hearing them from someone else made them more real. Caleb Harper, whoever he was, had made his choice. Now Ethan was making his to stay, at least for a while, until Lily was strong enough to face whatever came next. He stepped out into the early morning, the air still cool before the sun could heat it to furnace temperatures. Cedar Springs was waking up around him, smoke rising from chimneys, the smell of coffee and bacon drifting from the boarding houses. It was just another frontier town, harsh and temporary, carved out of the desert by desperate men chasing dreams of silver and gold. But for now, it was where Lily Harper would heal, and where Ethan Cole would wait, because sometimes keeping a promise to a child was more important than wherever you were planning to go. He looked east, toward the desert and the boulder where he'd found her. Somewhere out there, Caleb Harper was either dead or running. Either way, he'd left behind something precious, a daughter who'd waited in the burning sun because she believed her father's word. "The dust never forgets," Ethan murmured, a saying he'd heard from an old prospector years ago. "It remembers every promise broken, every soul abandoned, and sooner or later, it collects what's owed." He didn't know if that was true, but as he headed toward the livery stable to tend to Judge, Ethan made himself a promise. Whatever happened next, Lily Harper wouldn't be forgotten. Not by the desert, and not by him. The sun climbed higher, painting Cedar Springs in shades of gold and shadow. Inside the doctor's office, a small girl slept peacefully for the first time in days, her fever broken, her hand still slightly curled, as if holding on to someone who'd promised to stay. And for once in his drifting life, Ethan Cole meant to keep a promise that wasn't even his to make. The boarding house smelled of lye soap and coffee, the kind of lived-in scent that marked every temporary home Ethan had known. Mrs. Henderson was a widow in her 50s, steel-haired and sharp-eyed, the type who'd seen enough frontier life to be surprised by nothing. She took his money without comment, showed him to a narrow room on the second floor, and informed him breakfast was at 6 and supper at 6, and if he missed either meal, that was his problem, not hers. Ethan didn't argue. He dropped his saddlebags on the bed, washed the desert dust from his face and hands, and headed back out into the morning heat. Judge was settled at the livery with grain and water, content after the hard ride. The horse had earned his rest, so had Ethan, but he found himself walking back toward Dr. Worth's office instead of seeking his own bed. Lily was awake when he arrived, propped up on pillows that made her look even smaller than before. The wildness had left her eyes, replaced by a clarity that was somehow worse. She watched Ethan enter with an expression that was far too knowing for a child. "Papa didn't come," she said. "Not a question." Ethan pulled the chair close and sat down, meeting her gaze directly. Children deserved honesty, even when the truth was hard. "No, he didn't." "He's not coming, is he?" The words hung between them, heavy with understanding. Ethan could have lied again, could have spun some story about Caleb Harper getting lost or delayed, but Lily's eyes said she already knew, had probably known since the moment her father walked away. She was just waiting for someone to confirm what her heart had already accepted. "I don't know," Ethan said carefully, "but I don't think you should count on it." Lily nodded slowly, her small hands plucking at the blanket. "Mama died last winter, lung fever. After that, Papa started drinking. Said he couldn't look at me without seeing her." Her voice was matter-of-fact, reciting tragedy like it was weather. "We were going to California. He said things would be better there, but then I got sick and we ran out of money and—" She trailed off, staring at her hands. "And he left you," Ethan finished quietly. "He said he was getting help." Lily's voice cracked slightly. "He looked me right in the eyes and promised. I waited and waited, but the sun kept moving and he didn't come back. I knew, but I kept waiting anyway because what else could I do?" The resignation in her voice hit Ethan like a physical blow. This child had spent hours in the burning desert, knowing she'd been abandoned but unable to accept the reality of it. The human capacity for hope, even in the face of absolute betrayal, was sometimes the cruelest thing of all. "You're safe now," Ethan said. It was inadequate, but it was true. "Am I?" Lily looked at him with those ancient eyes. What happens to children nobody wants? It was a question Ethan couldn't answer, not honestly. Dr. Worth had been right to worry about what came next. Cedar Springs wasn't the kind of town that had resources for orphans. She'd likely end up bound to some family as unpaid labor, or shipped to one of the territorial orphanages where conditions were rumored to be worse than prison. "We'll figure something out," Ethan said. "You don't have to stay," Lily said quietly. "You already helped me. That's more than most people would do." "I told you I wouldn't leave you alone." "People break promises all the time." The words were delivered without accusation, just a simple statement of learned fact. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. This child had been taught by bitter experience that words meant nothing, that promises were just sounds people made before disappearing. "I don't," he said. "When I give my word, I keep it." Lily studied him for a long moment, searching for the lie. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her because she nodded slightly and settled back against the pillows. "Okay." That single word carried more weight than an hour of conversation. Lily Harper had decided to trust him, at least for now, and Ethan felt the responsibility of that trust settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. Dr. Worth appeared from the back room carrying a bowl of broth. "Good, you're awake. Time to get some food in you, young lady." Lily eyed the broth suspiciously. "I'm not hungry." "Don't care if you're hungry. You need to eat." Dr. Worth sat on the edge of the table, his manner brisk but kind. "You lost a lot of weight in that desert. We need to build your strength back up." "What's the point?" Lily's voice was small. "If Papa's not coming back, where am I supposed to go?" Dr. Worth and Ethan exchanged glances over her head. The doctor sighed. "One thing at a time, child. Right now, the point is to get well. The rest we'll sort out when you're stronger." Lily accepted the broth without further argument, sipping it slowly while Ethan watched. She managed about half the bowl before exhaustion claimed her again, and Dr. Worth gently took it away. "She's tougher than she looks," the doctor said once Lily had drifted back to sleep. "But that toughness came at a cost. No child should have to be that resilient." "No," Ethan agreed. "They shouldn't." Over the next 3 days, Ethan fell into a routine he'd never planned. Mornings at the boarding house, eating Mrs. Henderson's substantial breakfast and listening to the other residents discuss mining claims and ore prices. Then to the livery to tend Judge, making sure the horse stayed exercised and ready to ride. And then to Dr. Worth's office, where Lily was slowly regaining her strength. She was a quiet child, cautious with her words. But as the fever faded and her body healed, glimpses of her real personality began to emerge. She was curious, asking questions about everything: why the doctor kept his instruments and alcohol, where Ethan had learned to ride, what California was really like. That last question always made Ethan uncomfortable because he still didn't know, was still spinning stories based on other people's tales. On the 4th day, Lily was strong enough to sit up for extended periods. Ethan brought her the cloth bundle she'd been clutching when he found her, and she opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a collection of small treasures: a carved wooden horse, a faded daguerreotype of a woman who must have been her mother, a few pressed flowers, and a letter written in a child's careful hand. "These are Mama's things," Lily said softly, touching the daguerreotype. "Papa said I could keep them to remember her by." Ethan looked at the image of the woman. She had Lily's eyes, that same serious gaze that seemed to see too much. She was beautiful. "She was kind," Lily corrected. "That's better than beautiful." She carefully repacked the bundle, her movements reverent. "Papa used to be kind too before. He'd tell stories and make Mama laugh. But after she died, it was like he died too. Just his body kept walking around." "Grief does that to people," Ethan said. "Makes them into someone they're not." "Is that why you're out here alone?" Lily asked, her gaze suddenly sharp. "Did you lose someone too?" The question caught Ethan off guard. He'd spent years avoiding conversations about his past, but there was something about Lily's directness that made evasion feel like cowardice. "Yeah," he said finally. "A long time ago." "What happened?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, weighing how much truth to share. "I had a wife and a son. There was a fever that went through our town, scarlet fever. They didn't make it." The words came out flat, emotionless, because that was the only way Ethan knew how to say them anymore. The raw grief had dulled to a constant ache over the years, something he'd learned to carry like an old injury that flared up in bad weather. Lily's expression softened. "How old was your son?" 5. "His name was Thomas." "I'm sorry." And unlike most condolences, Lily's seemed genuine, born from her own understanding of loss. "Is that why you helped me? Because of him?" "Maybe." Ethan hadn't consciously made that connection, but now that Lily had spoken it aloud, he couldn't deny the truth of it. "Or maybe I just couldn't ride past a child dying in the desert." "Most people could," Lily said quietly. "Most people did." She was right. That stretch of desert road was traveled frequently enough. Others must have passed that boulder, seen the small shape huddled against it, and kept riding. The frontier had a way of teaching people to mind their own business, to not get involved in other people's tragedies. Ethan had lived by that rule for years, until he didn't. That evening, Ethan was eating supper at the boarding house when Mrs. Henderson dropped into the chair across from him, her expression grave. "Heard about the child," she said without preamble. "Doc Worth says she's getting stronger." "She is." "Also heard her father left her to die out there." Mrs. Henderson's voice carried the flat judgment of a woman who'd seen too much human weakness. "What kind of man does that to his own blood?" "A desperate one," Ethan said. "A broken one. Maybe a coward." "Those things aren't excuses." "No, they're not." Ethan pushed his plate aside, his appetite gone. "What happens to children like her in towns like this?" Mrs. Henderson sighed. "Nothing good. If she's lucky, some family takes her in as help. Cooking, cleaning, watching younger kids. If she's not lucky," she shook her head, "there's people who'll use a child in ways that don't bear thinking about. And the territorial orphanage in Carson City might as well be a prison. Kids go in, come out hard as nails if they come out at all." The bleak assessment confirmed Ethan's own fears. There's got to be something better. "Maybe, but not here." Mrs. Henderson studied him. "You planning to take responsibility for her?" "I don't know what I'm planning," Ethan admitted. "I just know I can't leave her to that." "She'll need more than good intentions. She needs a home, stability, someone who will actually raise her proper. You seem like a decent man, Mr. Cole, but you've got drifter written all over you. That's not the life for a child." "I know." Mrs. Henderson stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "Well, you better figure something out soon. Doc Worth can't keep her indefinitely, and people are starting to talk. A stranger coming into town with a dying child, no explanation for where the parents are. It raises questions." After she left, Ethan sat alone at the table, staring at the dregs of his coffee. Mrs. Henderson was right. He'd bought Lily time by getting her to safety, but time was running out. Soon decisions would need to be made, and he was no closer to knowing what those decisions should be. The next morning brought an answer, though not the one Ethan had hoped for. He was walking to Dr. Worth's office when he noticed a commotion near the saloon. A small crowd had gathered, and Ethan could hear raised voices. He detoured to investigate, some instinct telling him this mattered. The crowd parted enough for him to see the center of attention. A man in his 30s, hollow-eyed and unshaven, swaying slightly as if the ground beneath him was unsteady. His clothes were filthy, his hands shaking, and he reeked of whiskey even from several feet away. But it was his voice that confirmed Ethan's suspicion, desperate and pleading, pitched toward hysteria. "I left her right there by the rocks. She was sick, and I went for help. I swear to God I went for help. But when I came back, she was gone. Has anyone seen a little girl? Brown hair, 7 years old, wearing a calico dress?" Caleb Harper. It had to be. Ethan pushed through the crowd, his jaw tight. The man who'd abandoned Lily in the desert had finally shown up, 3 days too late, drunk, and probably still carrying whatever debts had driven him to such desperation. "You're Lily's father," Ethan said flatly. Caleb's bloodshot eyes focused on him with difficulty. "You've seen her? You've seen my daughter?" "I found her where you left her, burning with fever, nearly dead from dehydration." Ethan let his contempt show. "I brought her to the doctor. She's alive, no thanks to you." Relief and shame warred across Caleb's face. "I can explain." "Don't care about your explanations." Ethan cut him off. "Where were you?" Caleb's shoulders slumped. "I got help. Went to the mining camp 10 miles east, tried to hire a wagon, tried to get someone to come back with me. But I had no money, and they wouldn't help without payment. So He gestured vaguely. "I found some work, thought I could earn enough for the wagon. But it took longer than I thought, and then I started drinking to forget what I'd done, and your daughter sat in the desert waiting for you to keep your promise," Ethan finished. The crowd around them had gone quiet, watching this confrontation with the avid interest of people who had little other entertainment. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Caleb said, his voice breaking. "When Sarah died, I thought I could still do it. Thought I could get us to California, make a fresh start. But everything kept going wrong and Lily got sick and I couldn't watch her die like her mother did. I couldn't." "So you left her to die alone instead," Ethan said. "That's what fathers do? Abandon their children when things get hard?" Caleb flinched as if struck. I know what I am. You think I don't know? I'm a coward and a drunk and a failure. But she's my daughter. I came back. That has to count for something. You came back drunk, 3 days late after someone else saved her life, Ethan said. That doesn't count for much. I want to see her. Caleb tried to draw himself up, tried to find some shred of dignity. I'm her father. I have the right. Ethan wanted to refuse, wanted to tell this broken man that he'd forfeited his rights when he walked away from his child. But legally, morally, Caleb Harper was still Lily's father. And Lily deserved the truth, deserved to see who her father really was without the softening lens of memory and hope. Come on, Ethan said roughly, but you're going to do this sober, and you're going to face what you did. He dragged Caleb to the public well, dunked his head in the water trough, and didn't let up until the man was sputtering and gasping. The crowd watched with approval. Frontier justice dealt swiftly to someone who'd violated one of the few sacred codes out here. You could be a thief, a killer, even a claim jumper, but you didn't abandon your children. By the time Ethan hauled Caleb to Dr. Worth's office, the man was shivering and marginally more coherent. Dr. Worth took one look at him and his expression hardened. Is this the father? The doctor asked. Unfortunately, Ethan said, Lily doesn't know I'm bringing him. I figured she should decide if she wants to see him. Dr. Worth nodded slowly. She's in the back room, been up and walking today, getting stronger. He fixed Caleb with a look that could have stripped paint. You hurt that child, and I don't mean the abandonment. You walk in there reeking of whiskey. You say one thing that makes her cry, and I'll have the sheriff throw you in a cell so fast your head will spin. Understood? Caleb nodded mutely. Ethan led him to the back room, knocked softly. Lily, you awake? I'm awake. Her voice was stronger now, no longer the thread whisper of the desert. Come in. Ethan opened the door, then stepped aside to let Caleb see his daughter. Lily was sitting up in bed, one of Dr. Worth's medical texts open on her lap. She'd been teaching herself to read the big words. When she saw her father, every bit of color drained from her face. Papa? The word was barely audible. Caleb took one stumbling step forward, then stopped as if struck by lightning. His daughter was alive, was real, was staring at him with an expression that held no joy, no relief, only a terrible understanding. Lily, Caleb whispered. Baby girl, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Lily closed the book carefully, her movements deliberate. You didn't come back. I tried. I swear I tried. You promised. Her voice was steady, but tears were streaming down her face. You looked at me and you promised you'd come back before it got hot, but you didn't come back at all. I was trying to get help. You were trying to get away from me, Lily said, and the quiet certainty in her voice was devastating. Because I was sick, and you didn't want to watch me die like Mama, so you left me to die alone. Caleb sank to his knees, his face crumbling. I didn't mean to. I couldn't lose you too, and I thought if I didn't see it happen, then maybe it wouldn't hurt so much, Lily finished. But it happened anyway, Papa. I almost died out there. And when I was burning up and couldn't breathe, you know what I thought about? Your promise. I kept thinking you'd come over that ridge any minute because you promised. I know, God help me, I know. Caleb was sobbing now, years of grief and guilt pouring out. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to see that you were alive. Lily looked at her father for a long moment, this broken man who'd let his own pain matter more than his daughter's life. Then she looked at Ethan, standing in the doorway. He stayed, she said softly. He's not my father, and he didn't have to do anything, but he stayed anyway. He kept his promise. The comparison hung in the air like an accusation. Caleb's face twisted with shame. I don't blame you for hating me, he said. I hate myself enough for both of us. I don't hate you, Lily said, and somehow that was worse. I just don't trust you anymore. How can I? Caleb had no answer for that. He stayed on his knees, head bowed, while his daughter watched him with eyes that had grown up too fast in a desert that showed no mercy to broken promises. Ethan cleared his throat. Lily needs rest. This conversation can wait. No. Lily's voice was firm. It can't. She looked at her father. What were you planning to do, Papa? If I died out there, what would you have done? I don't know. Caleb's voice was raw. Probably drunk myself to death. Wouldn't have been much of a loss. And if I lived, what then? I'd, Caleb faltered. I'd try to do better. Try to be the father you deserve. Can you do that? Lily asked. Can you stop drinking? Can you look at me without seeing Mama? Can you keep a promise? The questions were delivered without cruelty, just a child's desperate need to know if her father could be trusted. Caleb looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and seemed to see for the first time what his choices had cost. I don't know, he admitted, but I want to try. If you'll let me. Lily was quiet for so long Ethan thought she might not answer. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, but not here. Not like this. What do you mean? I mean you need to get clean. Really clean. Not just dunked in a water trough. You need to prove you can take care of yourself before I'll believe you can take care of me. Lily's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Mr. Cole stayed because he gave his word. If you want to be my papa again, you need to learn to do the same. The challenge hung in the air. Caleb looked at Ethan, something like desperation in his eyes. How? I've got no money, no prospects. I owe people, dangerous people. I can't just start over. Then you figure it out, Ethan said flatly. That's what fathers do. They figure it out because giving up isn't an option when you've got a child depending on you. Caleb's shoulders sagged, but he nodded. Okay, I'll find work. I'll stay sober. I'll prove I can do this. Good. Dr. Worth appeared in the doorway, his expression stern. And you'll do it somewhere else. Lily needs rest, and you need to leave before I lose my patience. Caleb stood slowly, his gaze never leaving his daughter. I'll come back tomorrow, if that's all right. Lily hesitated, then nodded. Tomorrow. But Papa, if you show up drunk again, don't bother coming back at all. The ultimatum was delivered with a child's blunt honesty, and it hit harder than any adult judgment could have. Caleb flinched but nodded, then let Dr. Worth escort him out. When they were alone, Lily looked at Ethan. Did I do the right thing? You did the brave thing, Ethan said. Whether it's the right thing, we'll have to wait and see. What if he can't do it? What if he tries, but the drinking is stronger than his love for me? Then we'll deal with it, Ethan said. But you gave him a chance, Lily. That's more than most people would have done after what he put you through. Lily pulled her knees to her chest, suddenly looking very small and very young. I want him to be my papa again. The one who told stories and made Mama laugh. But I don't know if that person exists anymore. Maybe he doesn't, Ethan said honestly. But maybe there's a new version of your father that could be just as good. People can change if they want it badly enough. Do you believe that? Ethan thought about his own decade of drifting, running from ghosts and grief, never staying anywhere long enough to risk caring again, until a fevered child in the desert had somehow cracked through all those defenses. I'm starting to, he said. Caleb Harper showed up the next morning sober, his hands still shaking but his eyes clearer than they'd been the day before. Ethan was already at the doctor's office, had been there since dawn, and he watched through the window as Lily's father stood outside for a full 5 minutes, visibly gathering courage before knocking. Dr. Worth answered, his expression skeptical. You're early. Didn't sleep much, Caleb admitted. Didn't drink either. Thought that was worth mentioning. One night doesn't make a habit, the doctor said, but he stepped aside to let Caleb in. Lily's having breakfast. You can sit with her, but I'll be in the next room. Any sign of trouble, and you're out. Caleb nodded and walked into the back room where Lily sat at a small table, methodically working through a bowl of oatmeal. She looked up when he entered, her expression carefully neutral. Good morning, Caleb said, his voice rough. Morning. Lily didn't smile, didn't offer any warmth, but she didn't tell him to leave either. You can sit if you want. Caleb pulled out the chair across from her, moving like a man approaching something fragile that might shatter at any moment. How are you feeling? Better? Dr. Worth says I can probably leave in a few days. Lily took another spoonful of oatmeal, her eyes never leaving her father's face. Where did you sleep last night? Under a tree by the creek. Didn't have money for a room. Because you spent it on whiskey before? The question was direct, unforgiving. Yes. Caleb didn't try to soften it. I spent every cent on trying to forget what I'd done to you. That's the truth, and there's no making it sound better than it is. Lily considered this, then pushed her bowl across the table. You should eat. You look terrible. The simple gesture, a child worrying about her father even after everything, nearly broke Caleb. He stared at the oatmeal, then shook his head. I don't deserve your kindness. Probably not, Lily agreed. But Mama used to say that deserving and needing are different things. You need to eat if you're going to find work. From his position by the door, Ethan watched this tentative negotiation between father and daughter. Lily was holding all the power in this relationship now, had claimed it the moment she'd faced her father with clear-eyed understanding of his failures. Whether Caleb could accept that shift, could rebuild trust from this new foundation, remained to be seen. Caleb ate the oatmeal slowly, neither of them speaking. When he finished, Lily folded her hands on the table. Tell me about the people you owe money to. Caleb's head snapped up. That's not something for you to worry about. I'm already worried about it, Lily said. That's why you left me, isn't it? Because you thought if those men found you, they'd hurt me too. The accuracy of her guess showed on Caleb's face. How did you? I heard you talking to yourself sometimes, when you thought I was sleeping, about men from Carson City, about gambling debts. Lily's voice was steady, but her hands had tightened into small fists. How much do you owe? $200. The amount seemed to drain something from Caleb. I was winning at first, thought I could make enough to get us to California proper. But then my luck turned and I kept playing, thinking I could win it back. By the time I realized how deep I was, the men I owed weren't the forgiving type. Are they looking for you? They were. Caleb rubbed his face with both hands. I heard from someone at the mining camp that they gave up, moved on to easier targets. But I don't know if that's true or just what I wanted to hear. Ethan spoke up from the doorway. $200 is nothing to men who have real money. They probably wrote you off as not worth the effort of tracking through the desert. Both Caleb and Lily turned to look at him. Ethan pushed off the doorframe and walked into the room. But that doesn't solve your problem. You still need money to support your daughter, and running hasn't worked out so well for you. I know that, Caleb said. I'm looking for work. The mines are hiring, and I can swing a pickaxe as well as any man. Mining work pays, but it's dangerous, Ethan said. And it won't help if you're underground all day while Lily needs someone to actually raise her. What do you suggest then? There was an edge to Caleb's voice, the defensiveness of a man who knew he had no right to pride but couldn't quite surrender it. I can't exactly be choosy about employment. No, but you can be smart about it. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat down. I've been thinking about this since yesterday. California's got opportunities, real ones, for men willing to work. But you can't get there broke and desperate. That's all I am, broke and desperate. Right now, yes, but that can change. Ethan leaned forward. I've got money saved, not a fortune, but enough. I was planning to buy into a ranch operation in the Sacramento Valley, place I heard about from a fellow in Montana. They're looking for working partners, men who can pull their weight and aren't afraid of hard labor. Caleb stared at him. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm making you an offer. Ethan's eyes flicked to Lily, then back to her father. You work off your drinking problem here in Cedar Springs. Get yourself clean, prove you can hold a job, and stay sober for more than a few days. Then we all head to California together. I stake you for your share of the ranch partnership, and you work it off over time. The proposal hung in the air like something fragile. Lily's eyes had gone wide, hope and fear warring in her expression. Caleb looked like he'd been struck. Why would you do that? Caleb's voice was barely above a whisper. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. I don't do it for you, Ethan said bluntly. I do it for her. He nodded at Lily. That child deserves a father who's worth something, and I think you could be that man if you had the right push. But if you take this offer and you fail, if you drink or run or let your daughter down again, I'll make sure you regret it. Understood? Caleb's throat worked. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you do. Lily's voice cut through her father's doubt. You know if you can do it or not. You're just scared to promise because you've already broken so many. The truth of it hit Caleb visibly. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and Ethan saw the moment something shifted in the man's eyes. Not redemption. That was too large a word for what happened in that cramped room, but perhaps the first fragile seed of it, the possibility that he could become someone his daughter didn't have to be ashamed of. Okay, Caleb said. Okay, I'll try. But I need you to understand something, Lily. I'm going to fail sometimes. I'm going to want to drink, and there'll be days I can barely look at myself. But if you're willing to give me this chance, I swear I'll fight for it. For you." Lily studied her father for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Don't make promises you can't keep, Papa. Make ones you can, even if they're small." "All right, then I promise to stay sober today, just today. And tomorrow I'll promise the same thing." Caleb's hands were still shaking, but his voice was steady. "One day at a time, I'll try to be the father you deserve." It wasn't the grand declaration of transformation that stories usually offered, but it was honest. And honesty, Ethan had learned, was worth more than any easy promise. Over the next 2 weeks, Caleb Harper proved himself in small, painful increments. He found work at the stamp mill, brutal labor that left him exhausted and aching, but kept him too busy to drink. He spent every evening at Dr. Worth's office, sitting with Lily as she continued to recover, telling her stories about her mother and gradually rebuilding the connection that his abandonment had nearly destroyed. There were hard moments. Ethan saw Caleb standing outside the saloon more than once, visibly fighting the urge to walk through those doors. Once, Ethan found him behind the livery stable, shaking so badly he could barely stand, the physical need for alcohol tearing him apart. Ethan stayed with him through that night, not offering sympathy or judgment, just presence, while Caleb sweated and trembled and somehow didn't break. "Why are you doing this?" Caleb asked during one of those dark hours, his voice hoarse. "You could have just taken Lily and left me to rot. It would have been easier." "Probably," Ethan admitted. They were sitting in the stable, the smell of hay and horses surrounding them, the Nevada night cold after the brutal day heat. "But she loves you. Even after everything, she wants you to be her father. I can't give her that. Only you can." "What if I can't be what she needs?" "Then you'll have tried, and that'll mean something." Ethan pulled his jacket tighter against the chill. "But I don't think you'll fail. I've seen men who couldn't be saved, and you're not one of them. You're just scared." "Of course I'm scared." Caleb's laugh was bitter. "I'm terrified. What if I get her to California and then fall apart? What if I hurt her again?" "What if you don't?" Ethan countered. "You can spend your whole life being afraid of what might go wrong, or you can take the chance that something might go right. Your choice." Caleb was quiet for a long time, his breathing gradually slowing as the worst of the shakes passed. "Thank you," he finally said. "I know I don't deserve your help, but thank you for giving it anyway." Ethan didn't respond. Some things didn't need words. By the end of the second week, Lily was well enough to leave the doctor's office. Mrs. Henderson, in a rare show of generosity, offered her a room at the boarding house at a reduced rate, claiming she could use help with the lighter chores. Lily threw herself into the work with the same determination she'd shown in everything else, learning to make beds with hospital corners and cook meals that actually tasted good. Ethan watched her adapt to this temporary life, watched her smile more easily and laugh at Mrs. Henderson's dry comments. But he also saw how she watched her father, tracking his movements, her shoulders tensing whenever Caleb was late coming back from work or when he seemed particularly tired. She was waiting for him to fail, even as she hoped he wouldn't. One evening, as Lily helped Ethan brush down Judge at the livery, she voiced what had been on her mind. "Do you think Papa can really do it? Stay sober all the way to California?" Ethan worked the brush through Judge's mane, considering his answer carefully. "I think he can do it today. And probably tomorrow. Beyond that, nobody knows. Staying sober isn't something you do once and it's done. It's something you choose over and over." "Like keeping a promise," Lily said quietly. "Exactly like that." Ethan moved to Judge's flank, the horse shifting contentedly under his hands. "Your father's learning that the hard way. But he is learning. What if those men from Carson City find him? What if they come looking for the money?" It was a fear Ethan had considered himself. $200 might not seem worth tracking someone over, but men who loaned money to gamblers didn't always think in practical terms. Sometimes they made examples of people just to maintain their reputation. "Then we'll deal with it," Ethan said. "But running and hiding hasn't worked so far. Sometimes the only way forward is straight through." Lily was quiet for a moment, absently stroking Judge's neck. The horse, usually standoffish with strangers, accepted her touch with unusual patience. "Mr. Cole?" "Ethan. You can call me Ethan." "Ethan." She tried the name out, then smiled slightly. "When we get to California, will you stay, or will you go back to drifting?" The question caught Ethan unprepared. He'd spent so much time focused on getting Caleb stable and Lily safe that he hadn't thought about what came after. The ranch in Sacramento Valley had been a vague destination, something to aim for, but he hadn't actually pictured himself settling there, settling anywhere. I don't know, he admitted. I've been moving for a long time. Not sure I remember how to stay put. You stayed here, Lily pointed out, when you could have left any time. That's different. How? Ethan didn't have a good answer for that. It just is. Lily accepted this non-answer with the grace of a child who knew when to stop pushing. Well, I hope you stay. Papa's going to need help, and She trailed off, suddenly shy. I'd like it if you stayed, if that's okay to say. Something tightened in Ethan's chest, an emotion he couldn't quite name. This child, who'd been abandoned and betrayed, was asking him to be part of her life. The trust implicit in that request felt both humbling and terrifying. We'll see, he said, which was the most honest answer he could give. 3 days later, Caleb's past came looking for him. Ethan was at the livery checking Judge's shoes before their planned departure the next morning when 2 men rode into Cedar Springs. They were the type you could spot a mile away, hard-eyed and well-armed, their clothes too fine for honest work, their manner suggesting they were used to getting what they wanted through intimidation. They stopped first at the saloon, asking questions, and within an hour, everyone in town knew who they were looking for. Ethan found Caleb at the stamp mill, working his shift. He pulled him aside, ignoring the foreman's protests. 2 men from Carson City just rode in, Ethan said without preamble. They're looking for you. The color drained from Caleb's face. The debt collectors. That'd be my guess. Ethan kept his voice low, urgent. You have 2 choices. Run, right now, hope they don't catch you. Or face them. I can't face them. I don't have the money. I know you don't, but running means leaving Lily behind, and we both know you're not doing that again. Ethan gripped Caleb's shoulder hard. So we face them, together. They'll kill me, or worse, they'll take it out on her. Not if we handle this right. Ethan's mind was already working through options, calculating angles. How much did you say you owed? 200 plus interest, probably closer to 300 now. Ethan did quick math. He had just under 400 saved, money he'd been hoarding for years against some undefined future need. Giving it up meant starting over from nothing, meant the ranch partnership would have to wait. But looking at Caleb's terrified face, at the progress this man had made over the past weeks, Ethan knew there was really only one choice. I can cover it, he said. Caleb's eyes went wide. No, absolutely not. That's your money, your future, and it's Lily's father, Ethan cut him off. Which makes it my problem too. We're in this together now, remember? That was the deal. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm telling you. Ethan released Caleb's shoulder. But this only works if you're with me. You don't run, you don't hide, you stand your ground. Can you do that? Caleb swallowed hard, then nodded. What do you need me to do? Come with me, and let me do most of the talking. They found the 2 debt collectors at the saloon holding court at a corner table. One was tall and thin, with the look of a man who enjoyed causing pain. The other was shorter, stockier, with cold eyes that assessed everyone and everything as either profit or threat. Both looked up when Ethan and Caleb walked in. Caleb Harper, the shorter man said, almost pleasantly. We've been looking for you. I know. Caleb's voice shook slightly, but he didn't back down. I'm here. Brave of you, or stupid. The man gestured to 2 empty chairs. Sit. Let's discuss what you owe. Ethan and Caleb sat. The saloon had gone quiet, everyone watching this confrontation with the morbid fascination of people who sensed violence in the air. Mr. Harper owes you money, Ethan said, taking control before Caleb could speak. How much exactly? The shorter man's eyes narrowed. Who are you? A friend, and someone who's authorized to negotiate on his behalf. We don't negotiate. We collect. Everything's negotiable. Ethan kept his voice level, calm. $300, you said? Plus interest accumulated over... He looked at Caleb. 4 months, Caleb supplied. 4 months. So let's call it $350. Be generous. I can have that for you by tomorrow morning. The 2 men exchanged glances. You have $350? The tall one asked, skeptical. I do. In a bank account in Carson City, as it happens. I can wire for it. Have the money transferred to whatever institution you prefer. Ethan leaned back, affecting an ease he didn't feel. But that's assuming we can come to terms. Terms? The shorter man's smile was cold. The terms are simple. Harper pays what he owes, plus interest, plus a penalty for wasting our time tracking him across half the territory. That brings the total to 500. That's robbery, Caleb burst out, unable to stop himself. That's business, the man corrected. You borrowed money, you agreed to the terms, and then you ran. Running costs extra. Ethan held up a hand, stopping Caleb from saying anything else. Here's my counteroffer. $350, paid in full tomorrow. In exchange, Caleb Harper's debt is cleared completely, no further interest or penalties. And you gentlemen ride back to Carson City with a profit instead of wasting more time in this dusty excuse for a town. The two debt collectors considered this. We could just take the money and still break his legs, the tall one said conversationally. Send a message. You could try, Ethan agreed, but I'm guessing you gentlemen are smart enough to know the difference between legitimate collection and assault. Sheriff in this town is former cavalry, doesn't much like bullies. And breaking someone's legs after receiving payment would definitely qualify as assault. It was a bluff. Cedar Springs Sheriff was an old drunk who barely left his office, but Ethan delivered it with absolute confidence. The shorter man studied him for a long moment, clearly trying to assess whether this stranger was someone to worry about. 350, he finally said. Cash, tomorrow morning before we ride out. And Harper signs a paper saying the debt is cleared in full. Done. Ethan stood, Caleb scrambling up beside him. Meet us at Dr. Worth's office at 9 o'clock. Bring the paper. As they walked out of the saloon, Caleb was shaking again, but this time from relief rather than withdrawal. I can't believe you did that. Neither can I, Ethan admitted. His saved money, years of careful hoarding, gone in one conversation. But looking at Caleb's face, seeing the man holding himself together through sheer will, Ethan couldn't regret it. Now you owe me $350 plus interest. Caleb stopped walking. What? You heard me. I'm not giving you charity, Harper. This is a loan. You're going to work it off at that ranch in California, every penny. Ethan's voice was firm but not unkind, and the interest is simple. You stay sober and you be the father Lily deserves. That's the payment I'm looking for. Caleb's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back. I'll pay you back. However long it takes, I'll pay you back. I know you will. Ethan clapped him on the shoulder. Now let's go tell Lily that tomorrow morning we're finally heading to California. For real this time. They found Lily at the boarding house, helping Mrs. Henderson prepare supper. When she saw their faces, she put down the knife she'd been using to slice bread and went very still. What happened? Caleb knelt down in front of his daughter, taking her hands in his. The men I owed money to found me. But Ethan settled the debt. We're free, Lily. We can leave tomorrow and no one's coming after us. Lily looked from her father to Ethan, understanding dawning. You gave him the money? For the ranch? The ranch can wait, Ethan said. Getting you and your father somewhere safe can't. Lily pulled her hands free from Caleb's and crossed to Ethan. Before he could react, she wrapped her arms around his waist and hugged him with surprising strength for someone so small. Thank you, she whispered against his shirt. Thank you for not giving up on us. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, then awkwardly patted her back. He'd forgotten how it felt to be hugged by a child, to be trusted so completely. It hurt and healed in equal measure. You're welcome, kid. That night, the three of them sat on the boarding house porch as the desert stars wheeled overhead. Lily sat between Ethan and Caleb, her head leaning against her father's shoulder, her hand holding Ethan's. It wasn't a traditional family, this odd collection of damaged people, but it was something worth protecting. Tell me about California, Lily said sleepily. The real California, not the made-up one. Ethan and Caleb exchanged glances over her head, and something passed between them. An understanding, perhaps, or an acknowledgement that they were in this together now. I've never been, Ethan admitted, but I've heard stories. Green valleys that stay green even in summer. Rivers so full of salmon they turn the water silver. Mountains that touch the sky. Sounds made up, Lily murmured, but she was smiling. Maybe it is, Caleb said quietly, or maybe it's just a place where broken people can start over. Either way, we'll find out together. Lily's breathing had evened out. She'd fallen asleep sitting up, exhausted by the day's emotions. Caleb carefully lifted her, cradling her the way he must have when she was younger, before grief and whiskey had stolen his ability to be a father. I won't let you down again. he said to Ethan over Lily's sleeping form. I swear it. See that you don't, Ethan replied, because that child's been through enough. Caleb nodded and carried his daughter inside. Ethan stayed on the porch, watching the stars and thinking about the past few weeks. He'd come to Cedar Springs as a drifter with no ties and no destination beyond the vague idea of California. Now he was leaving as part of something larger than himself, responsible for a child's safety and her father's redemption. It should have felt like a trap, like chains weighing him down. But as Ethan sat there in the desert night, he realized it felt more like an anchor, something to hold on to when the wind blew cold and the road got hard. Tomorrow they'd ride out of Cedar Springs, heading west toward whatever waited in California. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But for the first time in a decade, Ethan felt like he was moving towards something instead of just away from everything. That had to count for something. The morning they left Cedar Springs, the debt collectors were waiting at Dr. Worth's office exactly as promised. Ethan counted out $350 while Caleb signed the clearance paper with a shaking hand, his signature barely legible. The shorter man folded the money carefully, tucked it into his jacket, and nodded once. Pleasure doing business with you, gentlemen, he said, though his tone suggested it was anything but. Harper, if I were you, I'd stay out of Carson City for a good long while. That's the plan, Caleb replied, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. The two men mounted their horses and rode east without looking back. Ethan watched them disappear into the desert shimmer, feeling the weight of his emptied savings like a physical thing. He'd worked for years to accumulate that money, had denied himself comforts and pleasures, all for the promise of something better waiting down the road. Now it was gone, handed over to men who trafficked in desperation, and all he had to show for it was the responsibility of two people he'd known less than a month. I'll pay you back, Caleb said quietly. Every cent. I don't know how long it'll take, but I will. I know. Ethan turned away from the empty horizon. Let's go. We've got a long ride ahead of us. They'd pooled their resources. Ethan's remaining $43, Caleb's wages from the stamp mill, and a small contribution from Dr. Worth, who claimed Lily had earned it helping around the office. It was enough to buy supplies for the journey and maybe a week's expenses once they reached Sacramento. After that, they'd be depending on the ranch partnership working out exactly as Ethan had been told it would. Lily emerged from the boarding house carrying her cloth bundle, now slightly fuller with additions Mrs. Henderson had quietly tucked inside. The older woman followed her out, her stern expression softening as she looked at the small girl. You take care of yourself, Mrs. Henderson said, pressing a packet wrapped in cheesecloth into Lily's hands. That's jerky and biscuits for the road. Should last you a few days if you're careful. Thank you. Lily hugged her impulsively. For everything. Nothing to thank me for. You worked for your keep. But Mrs. Henderson's voice was rough, and she quickly stepped back, clearing her throat. Your father better do right by you, or he'll answer to me. Yes, ma'am, Caleb said, and he sounded like he meant it. They mounted up, Ethan on Judge, Caleb on a sturdy mare he'd bought with his mill wages, and Lily riding behind her father, her arms wrapped around his waist. Doctor. Worth appeared to see them off, along with a small gathering of townspeople who'd come to witness this odd family's departure. The road to Sacramento runs northwest through some rough country, Dr. Worth said, handing Ethan a hand-drawn map. You'll want to follow the Truckee River once you get into the mountains. There's settlements along the way if you need to stop. And Cole? He lowered his voice. You did a good thing here. Don't let anyone tell you different. Ethan accepted the map without comment. Good things didn't always feel good, especially when they cost you everything you'd saved. But he nodded his thanks and turned Judge toward the western road. The first week of travel was harder than any of them had anticipated. The Nevada territory gave way to the Sierra foothills grudgingly, the landscape remaining stubbornly arid even as the elevation gradually increased. Water was scarce, good camping spots scarcer, and the heat continued to press down like a physical weight. Lily handled it better than Ethan expected. She didn't complain about the long days in the saddle or the simple meals they cooked over small fires. Instead, she watched everything with quiet intensity, asking questions about the plants they passed, the birds they saw, the shape of the mountains ahead. She was storing up knowledge the way some people stored provisions, preparing herself for whatever came next. Caleb struggled more visibly. The physical demands of the journey weren't the problem. He was used to hard labor, but the lack of alcohol was eating at him in ways that became increasingly difficult to hide. His hands shook constantly now, and he woke most nights gasping from dreams he refused to discuss. Ethan watched him fight through it, saw him grip his saddle horn white-knuckled when they passed a settlement with a saloon, saw the way he had to close his eyes and count to 10 before he could respond to Lily's innocent questions. On the 8th night, they camped beside a creek that tumbled down from the mountains, the first really substantial water they'd seen since leaving Cedar Springs. Lily had gone to sleep almost immediately after eating, exhausted from the day's ride. Ethan and Caleb sat by the fire, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. "I need you to know something," Caleb finally said, his voice barely audible over the creek's murmur. "There are days I want to drink so badly I can taste it. Days where every mile we ride, I'm thinking about turning back, finding a bottle, just having one drink to take the edge off." "But you don't," Ethan said. "No, because every time I think about it, I look at Lily and I remember her face when I came back to Cedar Springs, the way she looked at me like I was a stranger, like she didn't know if she could trust me." Caleb's jaw worked. "I can't do that to her again. I physically can't." "That's what's keeping you sober? Fear of disappointing her? Is that not enough?" Caleb looked at him. "What kept you going after you lost your family?" The question hit Ethan like a fist. He'd told Lily about Thomas and his wife, but he'd never discussed it with Caleb. "Nothing kept me going. I just moved, one town to the next, one job to another. I wasn't living, I was just not dying." "And now?" Ethan poked at the fire with a stick, watching the sparks spiral up toward the stars. "Now, I don't know, but it feels different. Like maybe there's a reason to actually arrive somewhere instead of just passing through." "Because of Lily?" "Because of both of you." Ethan met Caleb's eyes. "You're trying to be better than you were. That matters. Not many people try." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "When we get to California, to this ranch, what if they don't want a drunk as a partner? What if they take one look at me and see what I really am? Then we figure out something else." "But Caleb, you need to understand something. You're not just a drunk. You're a father who's fighting like hell to be worthy of his daughter. That's who you are right now. Don't let what you were define what you're becoming." The words seemed to steady something in Caleb. He nodded slowly, then stood and checked on Lily, adjusting the blanket around her sleeping form with the gentle care of someone who'd remembered how to be tender. They crossed into California territory 2 days later, though the landscape didn't immediately change to match the Promised Land stories. The mountains grew steeper, the road more treacherous, and twice they had to dismount and lead the horses through sections where one misstep would mean a fatal fall. Lily handled it with the same quiet determination she applied to everything, but Ethan could see the fear in her eyes when she looked down at the drops beside the trail. "Don't look down," he told her during one particularly harrowing stretch. "Look at where you're going, not where you might fall." "That's harder than it sounds," Lily said, but she kept her eyes forward and made it through. They finally reached the Truckee River Valley 3 weeks after leaving Cedar Springs, and the sight of it nearly broke Ethan's careful composure. The valley was everything the stories had promised, green and lush, with the river running clear and cold through stands of pine and cedar. After weeks of desert and barren mountains, the abundance of water and vegetation seemed almost obscene. "Is this California?" Lily asked, her voice full of wonder. "The real California?" "This is it," Ethan confirmed. "Welcome to the Promised Land, kid." They followed the river west, passing through small settlements that catered to travelers and prospectors. In one town called Auburn, they stopped to resupply and get information about the Sacramento Valley ranch Ethan had been aiming for. The general store owner, a weathered man named Fletcher, knew the place immediately. "The Morrison Ranch? Sure, I know it. Good operation, from what I hear. They've been looking for partners since old man Morrison died last year. His sons are running it now, trying to expand." "How far?" Ethan asked. 3 days' ride if the weather holds. Follow the river down to the valley, then northwest toward the town of Colusa. Morrison Place is about 10 miles past that." Fletcher studied them with open curiosity. "You folks looking to buy in?" "That's the plan." "Well, I'll warn you fair. The Morrisons are particular about who they partner with. They'll want to see you can work, that you're serious about ranching and not just looking for easy money." His eyes lingered on Caleb, taking in the shakes and the gaunt look. "And they don't tolerate drinking. Had to let go a good hand last season because he couldn't stay away from the bottle." The warning was clear. Ethan saw Caleb's face go tight, saw Lily's hand instinctively reach for her father's. This was the test they'd been traveling toward, The moment where Caleb would either prove himself or reveal that all his fighting had been for nothing. "My friend doesn't drink," Ethan said firmly, "and we're serious about the work. We'll be there in 3 days." Fletcher nodded, though his skepticism was plain. They bought their supplies and left, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on all of them. That night, camped beside the river with the sound of water rushing over rocks, Lily sat between Ethan and Caleb and asked the question that had been hanging unspoken between them. What if they say no? What if we get there and they don't want us? Then we find something else, Ethan said. There's always work for people willing to do it. But you gave up your money for us, Lily pressed. All of it. What if this doesn't work out and it's because of us? Ethan looked at this small girl who'd somehow become the center of his world over the past month. Lily, I've spent 10 years running from everything that mattered. I had money, sure, but I had nothing else. No home, no family, no reason to wake up in the morning except that I hadn't died in the night. That's not living. So if this doesn't work out, we'll try something else. Together. That's what families do. We're a family? Lily's voice was small, uncertain. I think we are, Ethan said. Not the traditional kind, but families don't have to be traditional to be real. Caleb cleared his throat roughly. Lily, I want you to know, whatever happens with this ranch, I'm not going back to who I was. Even if I have to dig ditches for the rest of my life, even if we're poor and struggling, I'm going to be your father. The kind of father you deserve. I promise you that. You said not to make promises you can't keep, Lily reminded him. Then I'll keep this one. Caleb's voice was steady despite the tremor in his hands. One day at a time for the rest of my life. I'll keep choosing you over the bottle. That's my promise. Lily studied her father for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, Papa, I believe you. The simple statement of faith seemed to strengthen something in Caleb. He pulled his daughter close, and Ethan looked away, giving them the privacy of that moment while the river rushed on and the California night settled around them. They reached the Sacramento Valley 2 days later, and the sight of it stole whatever words Ethan might have found. The valley stretched out for miles, flat and fertile, with the river winding through it like a silver ribbon. Farmland stretched in every direction, broken by stands of oak trees and the occasional ranch complex. The soil was dark and rich, nothing like the dust and hardpan they'd left behind in Nevada. It's beautiful, Lily breathed. It's like someone painted it. It's real, Ethan said, still trying to absorb the reality of it. This is really what California looks like. They found the town of Colusa easily enough, a prosperous-looking settlement with well-maintained buildings and streets that suggested real civilization rather than the temporary camps they'd passed through. Ethan asked after the Morrison Ranch and was directed northwest with assurances that they couldn't miss it. The ranch appeared as the sun was beginning to set, and it was larger than Ethan had imagined. Acres of pasture land contained cattle that looked well-fed and healthy, fenced with sturdy rails that had clearly been maintained. The main house was a substantial structure, 2 stories of whitewashed wood with a wraparound porch. Behind it sat a barn, several outbuildings, and what looked like housing for ranch hands. This is it, Ethan said, though part of him couldn't quite believe they'd actually arrived. After weeks of travel, after everything they'd been through, they were finally here. It's bigger than I thought, Caleb said, and Ethan heard the nervousness in his voice. Professional. That's good. Means it's a real operation, not just someone playing at ranching. Ethan straightened in his saddle, trying to project confidence he wasn't entirely feeling. Let me do the talking at first. We'll see what they're looking for. They rode up to the main house and dismounted. Before Ethan could knock, the front door opened and a man stepped out onto the porch. He was maybe 40, tall and solid, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent his life working outdoors. His eyes took in the 3 travelers with practiced assessment. Help you folks? His tone was neutral, neither welcoming nor hostile. Looking for the Morrison Ranch, Ethan said. Heard you might be looking for partners. Might be. The man descended the porch steps, moving with the easy confidence of someone on his own land. I'm James Morrison. This is my family's ranch. You got names? Ethan Cole. This is Caleb Harper and his daughter, Lily. Ethan dismounted, offering his hand. Morrison shook it, his grip firm. I heard from a fellow in Montana that your family was looking for working partners, men willing to buy in and pull their weight. We are. Morrison's eyes moved to Caleb, lingered there with the kind of scrutiny that saw too much. Ranching's hard work, long hours, difficult conditions. We need partners who can commit to that, who won't bail when things get rough. We can commit, Ethan said. Can you? Morrison looked at Caleb directly now. No offense intended, but you look like you're about to shake apart, and I've seen enough men with the tremors to know what causes them. The directness of the accusation hung in the air. Lily's hand found her father's, holding tight. Caleb met Morrison's gaze without flinching. You're right, Caleb said, his voice steady despite the shaking of his hands. I'm a drunk. Or I was. Been sober about 5 weeks now, and it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Some days I can barely stand it, but I'm fighting because my daughter deserves a father who's worth something, and because these people here believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. The honesty of it seemed to surprise Morrison. His expression softened slightly. 5 weeks is a start, but staying sober when you're desperate and traveling is different from staying sober when you've got money in your pocket and a saloon in town. I know, Caleb said. I can't promise I'll never be tempted. I can't promise it won't be hard every single day. But I can promise I'll keep fighting. And if I fail, if I let my daughter down again, then Mr. Cole has my permission to put me on the first stage out of here. Morrison studied him for a long moment, then looked at Ethan. And you're willing to vouch for him? I am, Ethan said. I've seen him fight his demons for 5 weeks straight. He's got more strength than you'd think looking at him. What about capital? Partnership requires a buy-in. $2,000 to start, covers your share of the operation, and gives you a stake in the profits. $2,000. It might as well have been $2 million. Ethan felt his stomach drop. I don't have that much. I've got about $40 and the promise to work harder than anyone you've ever seen, Morrison sighed. I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Cole, but wait! A woman's voice came from the house. Morrison turned as a woman in her 30s appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She had kind eyes, and the same weathered look as her husband. James, let them stay the night at least. They've clearly traveled far, and that little girl looks exhausted. Morrison hesitated, then nodded. My wife, Emma, and she's right. It's nearly dark. You can stable your horses in the barn and sleep in the hands' quarters. We'll talk more in the morning. Thank you, Ethan said. We appreciate it. Emma Morrison came down from the porch and crouched in front of Lily, who'd been standing quiet through all of this. When's the last time you had a proper meal, sweetheart? This morning, Lily said. We had jerky and biscuits. That's not a proper meal. Come on, I've got stew keeping warm and fresh bread. You men can join us once you've seen to your horses. She led Lily into the house, and Ethan felt something in his chest ease slightly. Whatever else happened, at least Lily would get one good meal and a real night's sleep. Morrison showed them to the barn, a well-organized space that spoke of care and attention. I'll be honest with you, he said, as they unsaddled their horses. Without the capital, I don't see how a partnership works. We've got 3 other families interested, all with the full buy-in amount. I understand, Ethan said, though the words tasted bitter. But maybe there's another arrangement. We work for wages, prove ourselves over time, buy in gradually. Maybe. Morrison didn't sound convinced. We'll talk tomorrow. For tonight, get some rest. You've earned that much. After he left, Caleb and Ethan stood in the barn, the reality of their situation settling over them like a heavy blanket. We're not going to get the partnership, Caleb said quietly. Without the money, we've got nothing to offer. We've got ourselves, Ethan said, though he knew how inadequate that sounded. And we've got determination. Sometimes that has to be enough. And if it's not? Ethan didn't have an answer for that. They'd come so far, sacrificed so much, and now they were standing in a barn in California with empty pockets and uncertain prospects. The promised land hadn't turned out to be quite so promising after all. They found Lily in the main house, sitting at a large kitchen table with a bowl of stew in front of her. Emma Morrison was bustling around, serving bread and butter, talking in a gentle stream about the ranch and the valley and life in California. When she saw Ethan and Caleb, she gestured to chairs. Sit. There's plenty. The stew was the best thing Ethan had tasted in months. Thick with meat and vegetables, seasoned perfectly, served with bread so fresh it was still warm from the oven. They ate in grateful silence while Emma watched with the satisfied expression of someone who knew the value of feeding hungry travelers. Your daughter has lovely manners, she said to Caleb, not always the case with children who've been traveling rough. Her mother taught her, Caleb said. before she died. I'm sorry for your loss. Emma's sympathy seemed genuine. It's hard raising a child alone. I haven't been doing it alone, Caleb admitted, glancing at Ethan. Mr. Cole saved both our lives. I wouldn't be here without him. Emma looked between them, understanding dawning. You're not brothers? No, ma'am. Just friends, I suppose. Family by choice rather than blood. Those are sometimes the strongest kind, Emma said. She refilled their bowls without asking. James mentioned you don't have the capital for the partnership. No, ma'am, Ethan said. I had savings, but circumstances ate them up. We're willing to work for wages, though. Prove ourselves over time. Emma was quiet for a moment, then stood and moved to the window, looking out at the darkening valley. My husband's father built this ranch from nothing, came to California with less than you've got and turned it into something real. James sometimes forgets that. Forgets that everyone starts somewhere, and it's not always with a full purse. She turned back to them. I can't promise anything, but I'll talk to him tonight. See if we can't work out some arrangement that gives you a chance. Her eyes settled on Lily. Every child deserves stability, and every father deserves a chance to prove he can provide it. Thank you, Caleb said, his voice thick. Whatever you can do, we'd be grateful. That night, in the hands' quarters, Lily lay between Ethan and Caleb on a real bed with real mattresses and blankets that smelled of soap instead of trail dust. She fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the journey and the uncertainty. Do you think Mrs. Morrison can convince her husband? Caleb whispered in the darkness. I don't know, Ethan admitted. But I think we've got a better chance now than we did this afternoon. And if it doesn't work out, then we keep trying. That's all we can do. Ethan looked at the ceiling, at the solid roof over their heads, and thought about how far they'd come. We've made it this far, Caleb. That has to count for something. Because of you. All of this is because you decided to stop for a dying child in the desert. No, Ethan said. It's because you decided to keep fighting when giving up would have been easier. It's because Lily believed her father could be better than he was. It's because sometimes people find each other exactly when they need to. Caleb was quiet for a long time. I'm scared, he finally admitted, terrified that tomorrow Morrison will say no and we'll have to start over with nothing. Then we'll start over, Ethan said, and we'll do it together. That's what family means. In the darkness, with California settling in around them and tomorrow looming uncertain, the three people who'd found each other in the dust and heat of the Nevada desert held on to that promise. It wasn't much, but sometimes a promise and determination were the only things you needed to keep moving forward. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, they were safe, fed, and together. For people who'd had nothing just a month ago, that was everything. Morning arrived with the scent of coffee and frying bacon drifting through the hands' quarters, pulling Ethan from a sleep deeper than any he'd known in weeks. Lily was already awake, sitting by the window and watching the sun paint the valley in shades of gold and amber. Caleb lay curled on his side, his hands tucked under his chin, still trembling even in sleep. It's pretty here, Lily said softly when she noticed Ethan was awake. Different from Nevada. Yeah, it is. Ethan sat up, working the stiffness from his shoulders. How are you feeling about today? Lily was quiet for a moment, her eyes still on the valley. Scared. What if they say no and we have to leave? What if we never find a place that wants us? Then we keep looking until we do. Ethan moved to sit beside her. But Lily, I need you to understand something. No matter what happens today, you're not alone. You've got your father and you've got me. That's not changing. You promise? I promise. And saying it, Ethan realized he meant it with a conviction that surprised him. This child and her broken father had somehow become his responsibility, his family, and he wasn't walking away from that regardless of what the Morrisons decided. Caleb woke a few minutes later, the shaking worse in the morning as it always was. He sat on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands, breathing slowly until he could trust himself to stand without his legs giving out. Bad night? Ethan asked. They're all bad nights, Caleb's voice was hoarse. But I'm still here, that's what counts. They made themselves presentable and headed to the main house where Emma Morrison had breakfast laid out on the porch. Eggs and bacon, fried potatoes, biscuits with honey, and coffee that tasted like civilization after weeks of trail coffee. James Morrison was already there, sitting with a younger man who had the same strong features. This is my brother Daniel, James said by way of introduction. He runs the day-to-day operations while I handle the business side. Daniel Morrison was maybe 30, with calloused hands and an easier manner than his older brother. He nodded to them. Emma told us about your situation, about the little girl. Lily, Ethan supplied. Her name is Lily. Right, Lily. Daniel glanced at his brother. We talked most of the night, James and Emma and I, about what to do with you folks. Here it comes, Ethan thought. The polite rejection, the suggestion they try their luck elsewhere, the end of the road they'd been traveling for weeks. But James Morrison surprised him. My wife made a compelling argument, said we'd be hypocrites to turn away people without capital when our own father started with nothing but determination. He paused, his eyes moving to Caleb. But determination isn't enough if you can't stay sober. So I need to know, and I need the honest truth. Can you do it? Can you stay away from the bottle? Caleb met his gaze without flinching. I don't know. I want to say yes. Want to promise you I'll never touch another drop. But the truth is, I think about drinking every hour of every day. It's like a voice in my head that never stops. He paused, his jaw working. But I've got something stronger than that voice now. I've got my daughter, and I've got people who believe in me when I don't believe in myself. So yes, I think I can do it. One day at a time, for as long as it takes. The honesty seemed to affect James Morrison. He exchanged a long look with his brother, some silent communication passing between them. Here's what we can offer, James finally said. You work for us. Regular wages, nothing fancy. You live in the hands quarters, take your meals with the crew. We see how you do. If you can handle the work, if you stay sober, if you're the kind of men we want as partners. After 6 months, if everything works out, we'll revisit the partnership discussion. Maybe work out a payment plan where you buy in gradually over time. 6 months, Ethan repeated, trying to process what he was hearing. You're giving us 6 months to prove ourselves? Emma insisted, Daniel said with a slight smile. Said that little girl deserved a chance to have a home, and she doesn't take no for an answer once she's made up her mind about something. What about schooling? Lily spoke up for the first time, her voice small but steady. I can read some, but Mama was teaching me before she died. I don't want to forget. Emma Morrison, who'd been standing in the doorway listening, came forward and crouched beside Lily's chair. There's a school in Colusa, sweetheart. It's about an hour's ride, but we can arrange for you to board with the teacher during the week and come home on weekends. Would you like that? Lily looked at her father, seeking permission. Caleb's throat worked as he nodded. We'd like that very much, ma'am. Then it's settled. James Morrison stood, offering his hand to Ethan. Welcome to the Morrison Ranch. We'll see if we can make this work. Ethan shook his hand, feeling something tight in his chest finally loosen. Thank you. You won't regret this. See that I don't, James said, but there was warmth in his voice now. Daniel will show you the operation, get you settled. We start work at dawn, break for dinner at noon, and finish when the work's done. Sundays off for rest and whatever personal business needs attending to. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that was both grueling and oddly comforting. Ethan and Caleb worked alongside the other ranch hands, mending fences, moving cattle, clearing brush, all the endless tasks that kept a ranch functioning. The work was hard, harder than anything Ethan had done in years of drifting, but there was a satisfaction in it. They were building something, contributing to something larger than themselves. Caleb struggled, especially in the first weeks. The physical labor combined with the withdrawal left him exhausted and shaking, barely able to lift his fork at mealtimes. But he never complained, never asked for lighter duty, just kept pushing through each day with grim determination. The other hands watched him with varying degrees of skepticism and respect, waiting to see if he'd break. He didn't break. Lily thrived in ways that took Ethan's breath away. The school in Colusa welcomed her, and she attacked her studies with the same fierce determination she applied to everything else. On weekends when she came home, she'd sit on the porch of the hands' quarters and read aloud to anyone who'd listen, her vocabulary expanding at an astonishing rate. Emma Morrison took her under her wing, teaching her cooking and sewing and all the domestic skills her mother hadn't lived long enough to pass on. One Saturday afternoon, about 2 months in, Ethan found Caleb sitting alone by the creek that ran through the property, his hands finally still for the first time since Ethan had known him. Shake stopped? Ethan asked, sitting beside him on the bank. This morning. Caleb stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. I woke up and they were just still. I didn't think that would ever happen. How does it feel? Strange. Like I'm missing something, but in a good way. Caleb picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the water. Dr. Worth told me the physical withdrawal would take about 2 months. I didn't believe him. Thought I'd shake forever. The mental part's harder, though, Ethan said. That's what they say. Yeah. Caleb was quiet for a moment. I still think about it. Not as much, not as desperately, but it's there. Like a scar that aches when the weather changes. He looked at Ethan. Do you think I'll ever stop thinking about it entirely? I don't know. Maybe some things you just learn to live with rather than overcome completely. Ethan thought about his own ghosts, about Thomas and his wife, about how the grief had dulled but never disappeared. But living with something is different from letting it control you. I suppose that's true. Caleb skipped another stone. Lily seems happy here. She is. Emma said her teacher thinks she's the brightest student in the school. Pride flickered across Caleb's face, followed immediately by shame. I nearly took that away from her. If you hadn't found us, if you hadn't stayed— But I did, Ethan interrupted. And you're here now, doing the work. That's what matters. I'm going to pay you back, Caleb said. Every cent you spent on my debt. I've been saving my wages, and once we make partner, I'll pay you back with interest. I'm not worried about the money. I know you're not, but I am. Caleb met his eyes. A man's word is all he really has. You kept yours when you promised Lily you wouldn't leave. I'm keeping mine by promising to pay you back. Ethan nodded, understanding. Some debts were about more than money. They were about proving to yourself that you were capable of honoring your obligations, of being someone worth trusting. The 6-month mark approached faster than Ethan expected. Summer faded into fall, the valley turning gold and russet, the air taking on a crisp quality that made the work almost pleasant. James and Daniel Morrison watched Ethan and Caleb with careful eyes, evaluating not just their work, but their character, their commitment, their ability to function as part of the ranch family. One evening in late October, James Morrison called them to the main house. Emma and Daniel were already there, along with the ranch foreman, a leathery old cowboy named Pete, who'd worked for the Morrison family for 30 years. Sit down, James said, gesturing to chairs around the large kitchen table. We need to talk about your situation. Ethan and Caleb sat, tension evident in their postures. 6 months was up. This was the moment of judgment. James looked at Pete. You've worked with these men every day. What's your assessment? Pete was the kind of man who didn't waste words. Cole's the best hand I've had in 5 years. Strong, smart, doesn't need to be told something twice. Harper started rough, but he's gotten solid. Works harder than he needs to, like he's trying to make up for something. Neither one complains. Neither one shirks. They're good men. Daniel? James looked at his brother. I agree with Pete. They've proven themselves. The question is whether we want to bring them on as partners or just keep them as hands. Partners, Emma said firmly. They've earned it. James nodded slowly. I think so too. But there's the matter of capital. We discussed a payment plan, but I've been thinking about it, and I have a different proposal. He turned to Ethan and Caleb. What if instead of buying in with cash, you buy in with sweat equity? You've already contributed 6 months of excellent work. We extend that to 2 years total. During that time, you continue working for wages, but you also start building your ownership stake. At the end of 2 years, you'll own a 15% share of the operation, same as what $2,000 would have bought you. After that, you're full partners with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Ethan tried to process what he was hearing. You're offering us a partnership without any money down? I'm offering you a chance to earn a partnership through work rather than capital, James clarified. It's not charity. You'll be working damn hard for those 2 years. But Emma's right that everyone deserves a chance, and you've proven you're serious about this. What about Lily? Caleb asked, his voice rough. When she's not in school, she'll need somewhere to live. We've talked about that too, Emma said. The foreman's cottage is sitting empty since Pete moved into town to be closer to his daughter. It's small but sturdy, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a sitting room. We thought you men and Lily could move in there, give you more privacy than the hands' quarters, let you be an actual family. The offer was so far beyond what Ethan had hoped for that he couldn't immediately respond. Beside him, Caleb had gone very still, his eyes bright with tears he was fighting to control. Why? Caleb finally managed. Why would you do this for us? James Morrison leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Because 30 years ago, my father came to California with a pregnant wife, $20, and a dream of building something. People along the way helped him, gave him work, gave him chances, believed in him when he had nothing but determination to offer. He always said that success wasn't just about what you built, but about giving others the opportunity to build too. He paused. And because Emma threatened to make my life hell if I didn't give you this chance. Emma smiled. Someone has to remind these Morrison men that business isn't just about profit margins. It's about people. So what do you say? Daniel asked. 2 years of hard work in exchange for a partnership stake and a home for your family? Ethan looked at Caleb, saw his own disbelief and hope mirrored there. Yes, Ethan said. Absolutely yes. Thank you, Caleb added, his voice breaking slightly. You won't regret this. I swear to you, you won't regret this. See that we don't, James said, but he was smiling now. Welcome to the Morrison Ranch, partners. They moved into the foreman's cottage the following week, and the act of unpacking their few belongings into a real home affected all three of them more than Ethan had anticipated. Lily claimed the smaller bedroom, arranging her cloth bundle of treasures on the windowsill where the afternoon light would hit her mother's daguerreotype. Ethan and Caleb took the larger room, setting up their bedrolls on simple frames that Daniel had helped them build. We have a house, Lily said that first evening, standing in the middle of the small sitting room and slowly turning in a circle. A real house that's ours. For the next 2 years at least, Caleb said. After that, we'll own part of the ranch. This'll really be ours. I can't believe it. Lily sat down on one of the 2 chairs that had come with the cottage. After everything that happened, Papa leaving me, almost dying, being so scared we'd never find anywhere to stay, we're here. We made it. You made it, Ethan corrected gently. You were brave enough to wait for your father even when he didn't deserve it. Brave enough to give him another chance. That strength is what got us here. No, Lily said. You got us here. You stopped when everyone else would have kept riding. You stayed when you could have left. You gave up everything to help us. I didn't give up everything, Ethan said quietly. I found something. Found you and your father. Found a purpose. Found a reason to stop running. He looked at Caleb. Found a family. Caleb's face crumpled. I don't deserve this. Either of you. After what I did. Stop, Lily said firmly. Papa, you have to stop thinking about what you did wrong and start believing in what you're doing right. You've been sober for 6 months. 6 months. That's not nothing. She's right, Ethan said. You can spend the rest of your life punishing yourself for your mistakes. Or you can accept that you're a different person now. You're not the man who left his daughter in the desert. You're the man who worked himself nearly to death to prove he could be trusted again. That's who you are now. Caleb wiped his eyes roughly. I'm still scared. Scared I'll fail, scared I'll let you both down. Then be scared, Ethan said. But don't let the fear stop you from moving forward. Feel it, acknowledge it, and keep going anyway. That night, their first in the cottage, Ethan lay in his bed and listened to the sounds of the house settling around him. He could hear Lily moving in her room, humming something soft and tuneless. Could hear Caleb's breathing evening out as exhaustion pulled him toward sleep. Outside, the Sacramento Valley stretched out under the stars, fertile and green and full of promise. Ethan thought about the past 6 months, about how dramatically his life had changed since that scorching day in Nevada when he'd almost ridden past a dying child. He'd been alone then, purposeless, just going through the motions of living without any real reason to wake up each morning. Now he had people depending on him, had a stake in something real, had become part of a family that wasn't bound by blood, but by choice and circumstance and shared struggle. The next 2 years passed in what felt like both an instant and an eternity. The work was relentless, cattle drives and fence mending, planting and harvest, the endless cycle of ranch life. Ethan and Caleb threw themselves into it, learning from Pete and the Morrison brothers, gradually becoming skilled ranchers rather than just hired hands. They worked in all weather, through scorching summers that rivaled Nevada's heat and winters cold enough to freeze the water troughs solid. Lily grew from a solemn 7-year-old into a confident 9-year-old, her transformation remarkable. She excelled at school, forming friendships with other children, losing the haunted look that had defined her when Ethan first found her. On weekends, she'd come home full of stories about her week, about books she'd read and arithmetic she'd mastered and plans she had for her future. She talked about becoming a teacher herself someday, about helping other children the way she'd been helped. Caleb's transformation was equally dramatic. The shaking stopped, the desperate edge faded, and gradually he became someone who could smile without it looking like it hurt. He attended a church in Colusa sometimes, not for religion, but for the community, and he formed friendships with other fathers who were navigating the challenges of raising children alone. He still had hard days, still woke sometimes from nightmares about that boulder in the desert, but the hard days grew further apart as time passed. One Sunday afternoon in the spring of their second year, Ethan found Caleb working on a small wooden box, carving something intricate into the lid with careful strokes of his knife. "What's that?" Ethan asked. "Memory box for Lily," Caleb said, not looking up from his work. "For her 10th birthday next month. Figured she could put her mother's things in it, keep them safe." He turned it so Ethan could see the design he'd carved. Flowers and vines, delicate and beautiful. Sarah loved wildflowers, used to pick them and press them in books. These are the flowers she liked best. "It's beautiful work," Ethan said, and meant it. "Where'd you learn to carve like that?" "My father taught me before he died. I'd forgotten I knew how until I started making this." Caleb ran his fingers over the carved wood. "It's strange how you can forget pieces of yourself, lose them to grief or guilt or whiskey, but they're still there, waiting for you to remember." "You've come a long way," Ethan observed. "We all have." Caleb set down his knife. "I was thinking about that day in the desert, the day you found Lily. If you hadn't stopped, if you'd done what made sense and just kept riding. But I didn't," Ethan interrupted. "And here we are." "Here we are," Caleb echoed. "About to become ranch partners, living in California, raising a little girl who's smarter than both of us combined. It doesn't seem real sometimes." "It's real," Ethan assured him. "And you earned it, every bit of it." The 2-year mark arrived on a crisp October morning, almost exactly 2 years after that first conversation in the Morrison kitchen. James called them to the house again, and this time when they arrived, there were legal documents spread across the table. "These are the partnership papers," James said, gesturing to the documents. 15% ownership in the Morrison Ranch, to be divided equally between Ethan Cole and Caleb Harper. You'll be full partners with voting rights on all major decisions. Profits are divided proportionally, losses are shared the same way. It's all here in the contract." Daniel pushed the papers across the table. "Read through them carefully. Ask any questions you need to. This is a legal binding agreement, and we want to make sure everyone understands what they're signing." Ethan and Caleb read through the documents slowly, Caleb sometimes asking for clarification on legal terms neither of them fully understood. But the essence was clear. They were being offered a real stake in the ranch, not just as workers, but as owners. "There's one other thing," Emma said, pulling out another document. "The foreman's cottage. We're signing it over to you, not as part of the ranch partnership, but as a separate property. It's yours, free and clear." "Why would you do that?" Ethan asked, stunned. "Because Lily needs a home that's actually hers," Emma said simply. "Not tied to a business agreement or a job, a place that's hers no matter what happens with the ranch. Every child deserves that security." Caleb's hands were shaking again, but this time not from withdrawal, from emotion too large to contain. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll sign the papers," James said with a small smile, "and then say you'll continue being the kind of partners we've seen over the past 2 years." They signed. Ethan Cole and Caleb Harper, once a drifter and a drunk who'd nearly let his daughter die in the desert, became legal owners of a thriving California ranch. The moment the ink dried, James shook both their hands firmly. "Welcome to the family business, partners." That evening, they told Lily over a special dinner Emma had prepared. The girl listened with wide eyes as her father explained that they now owned part of the ranch, that the cottage was legally theirs, that they'd achieved what they'd set out to do when they left Nevada 2 years ago. "Does this mean we're staying?" Lily asked. "Forever?" "If that's what you want," Caleb said. "Is it?" Lily looked around the table, at her father who'd fought so hard to become someone worthy of her love, at Ethan who'd proven that promises could be kept, at the Morrisons who'd given them a chance when they had nothing. "Yes," she said, "this is home." 6 months later, word reached them through Pete that the men who'd loaned Caleb money had been arrested in Carson City for extortion and assault. They'd finally gone too far, had threatened the wrong person, and the territorial marshal had shut down their operation. The debt that had once hung over Caleb like a death sentence was now meaningless, dissolved along with the men's criminal enterprise. "They're gone," Ethan told Caleb when he heard the news. "Whatever power they had over you, it's gone." Caleb sat down heavily on the cottage steps, the news taking a moment to fully register. "I spent so long running from them, so terrified of what they'd do if they found me. And now they're just gone." "That's how it goes sometimes," Ethan said. "The things we fear lose their power when we stop running and start building something stronger than the fear." "You're getting philosophical in your old age," Caleb said, but he was smiling. "I'm not old. I'm 37. Ancient," Caleb teased. Then his expression turned serious. "I have something for you." He pulled an envelope from his pocket, worn from being carried. "It's not everything I owe you, but it's a start." Ethan opened the envelope to find $300, nearly a year's wages for Caleb. "This is too much." "It's not enough," Caleb countered. "You spent $350 on my debt. I'm paying you back like I promised. The rest will come over time, but I wanted you to have this now. Wanted to prove I keep my promises." "You've already proven that," Ethan said, but he took the money because he understood this was important to Caleb. Some debts had to be paid in full for a man to truly believe he'd redeemed himself. 3 years after arriving at the Morrison Ranch, Lily turned 12 and announced she wanted to become a teacher. Not someday in the vague future, but as soon as she was old enough. Emma Morrison helped her find resources, connected her with the teacher in Colusa who'd been instructing her, arranged for Lily to begin apprenticing in the classroom during her free time. Watching his daughter discover her passion and pursue it with characteristic determination brought tears to Caleb's eyes more than once. "She's going to do great things," he told Ethan one evening as they sat on the cottage porch, watching the sun set over the valley. "She already has," Ethan replied. "She saved both of us, if you think about it. You got sober for her. I stopped running because of her. She's the reason any of this happened." "I think you're the reason," Caleb said. "You could have ridden past that boulder. Should have, probably. But you didn't, and that one decision changed everything." "Maybe we all saved each other," Ethan suggested. "Maybe that's how family works. Not one person rescuing everyone else, but all of you holding each other up when the weight gets too heavy to carry alone." Caleb was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I think that's exactly what family is." 5 years after that day in the Nevada desert, the Morrison Ranch held its annual harvest celebration. The whole community came. Neighboring ranchers, townspeople from Colusa, everyone who'd been part of making the ranch successful. There was food and music, dancing and laughter, the kind of gathering that marked not just a successful harvest, but a thriving community. Ethan stood slightly apart from the crowd, watching Lily dance with some of the other children. She was 14 now, tall and confident, her resemblance to her mother striking. She caught his eye and waved, her smile bright and unguarded, and Ethan felt that familiar tightness in his chest that came whenever he realized how far they'd all traveled. "You look contemplative," Emma Morrison said, appearing beside him with 2 cups of punch. "Just thinking about how different things could have been," Ethan admitted, accepting a cup. "If I'd ridden past that boulder, if Caleb hadn't come back, if you and James hadn't given us a chance." "But you didn't. He did, and we did," Emma said. "That's the story that actually happened. The what-ifs don't matter as much as the what-is." "The what-is is pretty good," Ethan said. "Yes, it is." Emma watched the dancers for a moment. "You know, James told me once that the best investments aren't always the ones that make the most money. Sometimes they're the ones that make people's lives better. You and Caleb and Lily, you were a good investment. We're trying to live up to it." "You already have." Emma touched his arm briefly. "Don't forget to actually enjoy what you've built, Ethan. You spent so long running and surviving. Don't forget to live." She moved back into the crowd, leaving Ethan with that thought. Live, not just survive. For 10 years before finding Lily, he'd been surviving, going through motions, drifting from place to place without purpose or connection. Now he had both. He had a home, a family, a stake in something real. He had reasons to wake up in the morning and plans for the future. Caleb appeared at his elbow, holding 2 plates of food. "Emma's right, you know. You look too serious for a party." "Just thinking." "Dangerous activity." Caleb handed him a plate. "Though I've been doing some thinking, too, about what comes next." "What comes next?" "Lily will be ready for normal school in a few years. After that, maybe college, if we can manage it. The ranch is doing well, better than ever. We're making real money now, not just scraping by." Caleb paused. I've been sober for 5 years. 5 years, Ethan. Some days I still can't believe it. You should believe it. You did the work. We did the work, Caleb corrected. All of us. You stayed when you could have left. Lily believed when she could have given up. The Morrisons gave us a chance when they could have turned us away. It took all of us to get here. He was right, Ethan realized. Redemption wasn't a solo journey. It required people willing to stand beside you during the struggle. People who believed in the possibility of change, even when you didn't believe in yourself. Come on, Caleb said. Lily wants us to dance. I tried to explain that neither of us knows how, but she's not accepting that as an excuse. They made their way to where Lily stood with a group of friends, and she immediately grabbed both their hands. Finally, everyone else's fathers are dancing. You two can't just stand around looking serious all night. I'm not her father, Ethan pointed out, though the protest was half-hearted. You're close enough, Lily said, and I'm claiming both of you for this dance whether you like it or not. So they danced, awkwardly and without any real skill, but with genuine joy. Ethan found himself laughing at Caleb's attempts to follow the rhythm, at Lily's patient instructions, at the sheer absurdity of how far they'd come from that desperate day in the desert. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left and Lily had gone to bed exhausted from dancing, Ethan and Caleb sat on their cottage porch as they'd done countless times before. The valley stretched out before them, peaceful in the moonlight, and Ethan thought about Emma's words about living versus surviving. I'm glad I stopped, he said into the comfortable silence. What? Caleb asked. That day in the Nevada desert. I almost kept writing, almost decided it wasn't my problem, but something made me stop, and I'm glad I did. So am I, Caleb said quietly. More than I can say. You gave me a chance to be someone my daughter could be proud of. That's a gift I'll never be able to repay. You don't need to repay it, Ethan said. That's not how family works. They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the night sounds of the ranch settling around them. Inside the cottage, Lily slept safely in her room, surrounded by memories of her mother and plans for her future. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly, and an owl called from the oak trees near the creek. This was home, Ethan thought. Not just the building or the land, but this. These people who'd found each other when they'd all needed finding, who'd built something real out of desperation and determination and a willingness to believe that broken things could be mended. The dust of Nevada felt like a lifetime ago. The boulder where he'd found Lily, the desperate ride to Cedar Springs, the debt collectors and the uncertainty, all of it had led to this moment, to this place, to this family that wasn't traditional but was absolutely real. Think Lily will remember any of it? Caleb asked suddenly. The desert, being abandoned, how close she came to dying? Probably, Ethan said. Trauma like that doesn't just disappear. But I think she'll remember other things too. Remember that her father came back, that he fought to become someone worthy of her. Remember that when things were darkest, people showed up to help. Those memories matter just as much as the painful ones. I hope so, Caleb said. I hope when she's grown and looks back on all this, she sees the good parts too. Sees that even when people fail, they can choose to do better. She already sees that, Ethan assured him. You made sure she sees it every day. As if to prove the point, Lily's voice drifted from her bedroom window, sleepy but content. Papa? Ethan? You two better not be staying up too late. We've got church in the morning, and Emma invited us for Sunday dinner. We're coming in, Caleb called back. Then to Ethan, quieter. Sunday dinner with the Morrisons. How did this become our life? One decision at a time, Ethan said, standing and stretching. One promise kept, one day of staying sober, one step forward when running backward would have been easier. They went inside, checking on Lily one last time before heading to their own room. She was already asleep again, her breathing deep and even, her face peaceful in the moonlight filtering through the window. The memory box Caleb had made her sat on her dresser, filled now with her mother's treasures and new memories she'd collected in California. In their room, as Ethan settled into bed, he thought about the question he'd carried for years after losing Thomas and his wife. What was the point of going on when everything you loved was gone? He'd never found a satisfactory answer, had just kept moving because stopping seemed worse. But now, 5 years after finding a dying child by a boulder in the Nevada desert, Ethan finally understood. The point wasn't to replace what you'd lost or pretend the grief didn't exist. The point was to stay open to the possibility that life could surprise you, that new families could form in unexpected ways, that broken people could heal each other through shared struggle and commitment. The point was to stop when you could have kept riding, to stay when leaving would have been easier, to believe in the possibility of redemption even when all evidence suggested it was impossible. The point was to choose, again and again, to show up for the people who needed you and to accept help from those who offered it. Outside, the California night settled soft and warm over the valley. Inside the small cottage, 3 people who'd found each other when they'd all been lost slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were home. Not because of where they were, but because of who they'd become together. The dust had settled. The promises had been kept. And in the green valleys of California, far from the boulder where it all began, a family built by choice rather than blood had found its way to something that looked a lot like happiness. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.